The English Sonnet. Basic structure. Here is a sonnet by Shakespeare to illustrate the form, and in fact the English sonnet is also known as the Shakespearean sonnet. The two names are really interchangeable. The meter we would expect to see in a poem of this sort is iambic pentameter. Iambic pentameter and meter in general are explained in another video in this series. For now, we will look only briefly at the very first line to illustrate. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Overemphasizing a little, but the idea here is that we have 10 syllables, 5 feet, and the stress pattern is unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed. I'll read one more time. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Notice the rhyme scheme. Line 1 rhymes with line 3, line 2 with line 4. This is also one way to begin analyzing the poem. The poem may be viewed as a series of 3 quatrains and an ending couplet. This would allow the organization to revolve around the rhyme scheme. Here is the second set of 4 lines, the second quatrain in other words. Notice the rhyme scheme continues. Line 5 rhyming with line 7, line 6 with line 8. Here is the third quatrain, the third set of 4 lines. Again, the rhyme scheme continuing. Line 9 rhymes with line 11, line 10 with line 12. And then the poem ends with a couplet, a set of 2 lines which rhyme. More often, a sonnet is analyzed by breaking it into 2 parts. The first 8 lines are an octave. In other words, the first 2 quatrains, the first 2 sets of 4 lines. This is the octave. And then the last 6 lines become the sestet. We're going to look at this in a little more detail. Here is the octave all by itself. In other words, the first 8 lines of the poem. We won't spend a great deal of time on content since we are looking primarily at structure here, but notice something very important that does relate to the structure. The first 8 lines, the octave, are a logical unit in thought. These 8 lines go together with a common purpose, a common idea in mind. Notice here that the poet is comparing someone to a summer's day. The last 2 lines of the octave begin to set us up for a change in thought, which will be illustrated in the sestet. Look at the last 2 lines here. And every fair from fair sometime declines, by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. The idea here being that nothing is eternal, everything changes. Now let's look at the sestet, the last 6 lines. Notice the way this starts with the word but. This is a very clear signal that we have a change of thought, a change in direction here. The idea is going to change somehow. Remember the line from the octave which said, and every fair from fair sometime declines. Now contrast this with the first line of the sestet, but thy eternal summer shall not fade. In other words, this is different. This is an exception. Somehow there's going to be something similar to eternity granted here. Eternal life of a sort. Keep in mind as you read the poem the old idea of the seasons being related to the stages of life. So spring becoming childhood, summer early adulthood in the height of life and vitality. Autumn then maturity, old age, and winter very old age and death. So the idea of eternal summer here is the idea of someone's prime of life. And what he's saying here is that this person's prime of life, that great beauty and all the other things that go along with that, will not fade. So how is this possible? How could Shakespeare as a writer possibly grant something like similar to eternal life here in a poem? And of course this is very much a contrast to the ideas related in the octave where he talks about everything changing. The key to this appears a few lines down when he says, in eternal lines to time thou growest. How will this person be immortalized? Well, in his lines, in the lines of his poem. He will grant a sort of immortality to this person in the lines of his poem. And after all, we are still reading his poems. We are still, indirectly at least, thinking about this person as he writes about this person. And in that sense, this person has been given a sort of eternal life. This person is still a subject for discussion and still being read about. This becomes even more clear in the last two lines as he says, "So long as men can breathe, their eyes can see, so long lives this." The poem, in other words. The poem is still alive. So long lives this, and this, the poem, gives life to thee. It's a beautiful love poem as he grants a sort of immortality to this person. So for basic review on form, we have 14 lines of iambic pentameter, a rhyme scheme of A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, G, G, a logical division in thought at line 9, resulting in a two-part poem, the first 8 lines of the octave, the last 6 lines of the sestet, and it ends in a couplet. For more on meter, please see another set of videos on the same channel on poetry metrics.